So, welcome. So, I'm going to start with an anecdote. A few years back, I was working for a technology consulting company, and we were doing performance reviews. And I was representing some people who had an operations background. It was a big performance reviews with some developers, some operations people. Developers could usually show that we've developed this new software with some AI maybe and something like that. Operations people, it was more like, well, it works. We have this big environment and we keep it running. So the bonuses and promotions were going more often to developers. I was thinking that that's not really fair because the operations people are doing great work as well. So this was a bit the inspiration for today's talks to think about product thinking and how we can help people with operations, platform engineering backgrounds to be recognized better. My name is Stéphane Di Cesare, so I work with platform experience at Deutsche Kreditbank, which is a German online bank. I've been working in different engineering skills, so from developer integration, QA, pre-sales, and I've always been interested in not only the technology, but also what is the value we bring.
And I'm Kat Morris. I am a staff product manager at Syntasso. We build Kretix, which is a platform framework. I was a developer for a couple of years, but was absolutely rubbish at it, so moved into product management pretty swiftly after that. And I've been working with platform teams on platform engineering projects and internal tools for the last sort of 6 or 7 years now. And we want to talk to you about product thinking and why it's important for cloud-native engineers and platform engineers in particular, not just to get pay rises, but also to deliver the right thing for your internal users. So Stefan will start with a bit about the what and the why. I'll talk a bit about identifying problems for solutions. Stefan will then tell you a little bit about metrics, and we'll say how you can bring product thinking to your role as an engineer, so it's not just for product managers.
Yeah, so then, if we look at IT from how it started, so in the beginning it was more of a cost center. It was about we have printing, word processing, later email, networking, and it was the services were pretty similar for everybody, and the point was mostly it has to be as cheap as possible. And in the meantime, the 30 years afterwards, IT is now providing a lot of value to the company. But for many companies, still it's been seen as a cost center, and there is not always a lot of focus on looking at what is the value that IT is actually bringing and how do we show that. And so as engineers, sometimes we like to do things like that. I don't know if it's very visible, so that's an Excel spreadsheet to control your Kubernetes cluster. I can read that if you can't read it. So the following quote best summarizes this project. They were so preoccupied with whether or not they could that they didn't stop to think if they should. And sometimes we are focused as engineers a bit more on what's the nice thing to do technically and not always on what is the value it's bringing in the end. So this is where product thinking comes to use. At that technology consulting company, my manager told me the important thing is you have to show the value of your work, and both are important. So you have to do work that have good value, and you also you need to be able to show it to your customer, because if you just do good value work and nobody notices it, they're not going to hire us again. They're going to think it's just easy. And so for that, it's important to focus on outcome rather than output. So outcome means the value you bring to your users. So it's not output, is more something like you do many Jira tickets or many deployments. Outcome is what really brings something for the people who are using it. And also, so we need to focus on the visibility part. And it's easier to be visible when you build something than when you operate something and you help with coordination. So there is really good article about this from Tagliarelli. I recommend to read it if you're in that situation. And so what are the principles? What do we mean with product thinking? So the first thing is to focus on the user value. So as I was saying, what does it bring to the people who use your software? Think about user problems before solutions. So look at what problems do users have, rather than what is the solution before looking at what is the best solution for the user you're speaking with. And then to think about outcome before the output. So to think about how do I see which value is being brought. And finally, think in products rather than projects. So when you build something, it's always important to think about the life cycle, to think about not only it's delivered, it's finished, I go home, but also how is it going to be maintained, how is it going to be updated in the future. So maybe you are going to do it, or maybe someone else is going to do it, that's okay as well, but what's important is to have a plan for that. Just don't build something and leave, because then nobody knows how it works and it will become technical debt later. And there is some literature about it. So some people might be familiar with team topologies, which is basically the book the concept of platform engineering came from. Marty Kagan, so the book on the top is very defines very well what product mindset is. So this book, Transformed, is more about in the context of a large company. And the other book I mentioned here, Empowered, is about product management in general. And this book, Escaping the Build Trap by Melissa Perry, is especially in the context of building software. So it's very good for developers to avoid, to look at which value you're bringing rather than is your Scrum velocity increasing. By the way, I'm going to send the slides to Sked afterwards, so you will have all the references, because we have quite many references in that talk. And so let's talk about user value. The book. Sorry. So it's important to think about who is your user. So typically we think about developers. It's for platform engineering. It's not only developers. It's a large part is developers, but think also about people who are doing regulatory work, for example. So we're a bank, so for us it's an important topic. People who are just looking at data. So finance, who wants to see how do I map this cost to this project. And also think at value. So it's a lot about making the organization more efficient, but it's also a lot about avoiding risk. And this is something that's helpful for people who are doing operations. Operations don't always build very much, which provides value in the end for the company, but operations is a lot about avoiding that things break and that there are negative consequences to your company. And here is some recommended reading as well.
Especially read that bottom one, because then I get my views up, because I wrote that one. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about problems before solutions. And the first thing that I thought of here is how many teams actually do this? How many teams actually think about the problems? Because I know that I've been not very good about this in my past. So often it will be whatever file lands on my desk today is going to be the thing I deal with and going to find a fix for it immediately, rather than stepping back and thinking, is that the right thing to do? Sometimes it might be whoever's got the strongest opinion, so it might be the loudest user that you're dealing with, or there's a concept called the hippo, which is the highest paid person's opinion. Sometimes they win. And sometimes it's, I already know a solution. I'm going to find problems that fit the pattern that I already know what to do. So how do you actually think about problems before you jump right into building something? Well, you have two jobs. The first job is to find the problem that is the most important one to solve. That means not just doing the thing that is burning on fire on your desk, it's actually looking around a little bit more. And the second one is to really deeply understand that problem to figure out how to solve it. Don't just assume that you can fix it the same way you fixed everything else, because it might not work. And this is called the double diamond. So this is something that we used a lot when I worked at ThoughtWorks, and it talks about the two different spaces that you have when building software. You've got the problem space, which is where you're thinking about exploration, defining the problems that you've got, and the solution space, which is about ideation, testing things, and that rapid iteration. So that build, measure, learn, agile loop sits in the solution space. I'm going to focus on the problem space because that's where product thinking can really shine. So, like I said, I've not always been the best at this. I joined a team, and it was my first platform team. It was about 7 years ago now. And I was the platform product owner, felt wholly unequipped, and then spoke to my team. What do we need to fix? What's going wrong? And we looked at our sort of solution space of what we could build. And we were like, oh, the pipelines, they're really old, they're on Jenkins. We should fix that. We need to make them more modern. We've got Azure now, we're doing Azure DevOps. Let's migrate all the pipelines. That's a problem that we can fix and we know how to do today. So we spent 3 months fixing these pipelines, migrating them to Azure DevOps for 0 improvement. We did not know how to maintain Azure DevOps because we knew how to maintain Jenkins. Everything took ages to run because we were incredibly inefficient because we didn't know how to write Azure DevOps. And the users saw literally no difference. They were provisioning things before, they're provisioning things now. Was that the highest value thing we could have been doing? Probably not. So instead, we should have explored the problem space. We should have thought about those top customer pains. What are our users actually finding painful today? We should have been building that customer empathy and understanding, figuring out what are they thinking, understanding what's going on, and also something that I think often gets missed is investigating the key business aims. So this is, what is your organization as a whole trying to do? The solution to problems that are going to reduce operational costs are going to be very different to the ones that are about speeding things up and making them go faster. And you can do this with some techniques. So we've got customer and stakeholder interviews. I have not met an end user developer who I've not sat in front of and said, hey, what's hurting you today? And they don't speak at me for an hour. So super easy to do. And the same with stakeholders. Those business users really want to talk about whatever their big red button burning issue today is. I really need to reduce costs. I really need to improve the speed of delivery. I need to increase value. Those kind of problems. Second one is data and process analysis. So what does the data say? So your users might say it's really painful to do problem X, like deploying a database, but actually the data says that people are not doing that very often, so it doesn't matter. They're doing something else, so maybe you focus on that instead. And the next one is shadowing, and I'll talk a little bit more about shadowing later because that one can be very, very powerful. It's where you sit side by side with those users. So back to my pipelines. So instead of jumping right in and migrating everything to Azure DevOps, what would have happened if we stepped back and said, why do we think this is a problem? What other things are the organization finding painful today? And in this scenario, after those 3 months, we did exactly that. And we found out that actually we were really, really slow at onboarding new customers, which was limiting our ability to grow. We were going to onboard a load of new teams soon, and that took forever. We also found that we were on a bunch of legacy services and legacy systems that were causing a big risk to the organization. Like Stéphane said earlier, risk is a big problem. So we could have focused on that. And actually, scalability at peak times was really poor. We were having to manually scale up and manually scale down again, which was costing a fortune. So should we have looked at that instead, rather than thinking about just doing the first thing that we saw? And that's when you come to think about defining that problem space. So once you have figured out what all your problems are, how do you decide which are the right ones to deal with and how I deal with them? So in this one, you want to be identifying the opportunities that you've got from those problems. How might we solve it? How might we improve our metrics? We want to be prioritizing those problems, which are the ones that are highest value to the business. And we need to gather all of that data and insight that we found in the exploration phase, ready for people who are going to go into that delivery phase. And some techniques. We've got another reference for you here. Value stream mapping and jobs to be done modeling. These are really good at thinking about what is the flow that people go through today? What are the points that are really, really painful for people? We've got, in terms of prioritization, you've got RICE analysis, which is a framework for just putting some data against things. It can be quite complicated. So I prefer value versus effort. You just put things on a 2x2 matrix. Value on one side, effort on the other, stack rank them against whatever is the least effort for the most value is the thing you do. And opportunity solution trees. This is a framework that was created by Teresa Torres in her Continuous Discovery Habits book. Really, really, really powerful. And I'll talk a little bit about how you can use that in the next slide and what I should have done. And then also all that analysis on the exploring work. So like I said, you need to gather that data and insight in a useful way to come into actually doing something and building something. So to my pipelines once again. if instead of saying, we're going to migrate the pipelines, we'd step back and say, what is the goal of our platform team? What are we trying to achieve? We'd have found out that in this organization, we wanted to reduce engineering toil by 50%. Lots of manual stuff. How can we reduce this? Well, we had a bunch of ideas. So we could have done the pipelines. We could have migrated our old services. We could have increased the scalability so you weren't manually scaling up and scaling down. Or we could have made onboarding, which was very manual, very painful, better. So we wouldn't have done the pipelines, which made no improvement to that whatsoever, and we would have seen that right away if we'd spent a little bit more time thinking about the problem space. And instead, we could have improved onboarding. So what we've got here is exploring the problem space, plus defining the problem space, and you are now experts in product discovery. Wow, amazing. But the thing with product discovery is you can choose the right thing to do, but how do you know that it had the results that you expected? Well, that's where metrics come in.
Yeah, so then metrics is the so this is for the issue that you need to show the value of what your team is doing, and it's becoming now with the current economy more and more so that the IT team is not just there but needs to prove what it's doing. And so this is why it's important to think about value, because if you don't think about the value of your team, the value your team is bringing in your team, then probably someone in the management very far away will look at it and it might not be what the real value is. So this is where product metrics come in. So product metrics measure the product outcome. So it's some kinds of metrics, not all the metrics. And it's not looking at how much output you achieve. So the point is not looking at how many Jira tickets, but trying to measure what is the value you bring for your users and customers. And so it implies that you must be able to understand what is the best value you can bring to your customers and focus on that. And it's also important not to confuse it with performance measurement. This is about are we solving the problems our users are interested in? So this is not about looking at if individual people are doing a good job. This is something different. And there is a good section on that in the platform engineering book by Camille Fournier, which we can recommend for this. So one way, one framework we can look for this is the so-called DevX framework. So this is about developer efficiency, which is usually a large part of what platform engineering is focusing to. It's not the only part, but it's probably a good starting point. The DevX framework assumes that there are three categories which are important for developers. One is being in flow state, so being in focus, not being disturbed. One is reducing the cognitive load, so that means not needing to know about hundreds of skills and regulations to be able to work. And have quick feedback loops, so that when a developer does deploy something, that you can see the results quickly and react according to that. And in that model, so what's interesting is that there are two different, these metrics are separated in two different categories, perceptions and workflows. And workflows are typically what we would look at as engineers, because it's like hard numbers, numbers that are easy to compute usually. Perceptions are more about customer satisfaction, and it feels a bit unscientific sometimes as an engineer, but it's actually a really important part, because that's the most important value you can bring to the customer in the end. And it has the advantage as well that perception metrics are a lot more difficult to game. So if anybody who's had more than a few years of experience of being an engineer has been in the situation that your goal depends on the velocity, and this is much more difficult to do when you have perception metrics. And here are some other frameworks that you can use as well. And this is the point here is to have a toolbox. There is not the correct metric, but it will depend on what your users need the most. So you need to focus on that to look what are the most important pain points, try to fix that, and then you can adapt the metrics with time as well. And there is a very good comparison of DevOps metrics, but that's actually quite close to platform engineering metrics at Octopus Deploy, so you can look at the link. So once again, I will post the slides later. And there is a panel on Thursday, so with Kat, about metrics. So you can, would be interesting to go there. And also, at individual contributor level, you can think that way as well and think about what are the outcomes that you personally want to reach, so for the company, but also for you. So do you want to learn? Do you want to save the world in some way? So this is something to think about, and it helps you as well. You can use the same strategy to set goals with your management as well. So to look for what are the most important outcomes for you and what are the best metrics to show that you have reached that. And now, on to Kat. Yeah.
But Stéphane and Kat, I'm not a cloud native engineer. I'm a cloud native engineer, sorry, not a product manager. So what can I do with product thinking? There's loads. But I have 4 for you with some fun AI generated images. So I promised I would tell you about shadowing before. You can be the cool guy in the hoodie hanging out behind the engineer. It's worth, this is really, really valuable and super powerful, because I was chatting to Stéphane earlier and he said, I have found something new every time I have done this with one of my users. You'll find out the weird places they're clicking on the UI that you didn't realize they were clicking before. You'll see the weird bash script that they pulled together to try and automate something that you weren't expecting them to automate. This is a super powerful technique to find out how people are actually using your products.
And you will find especially what can make the user's life easier that they are not asking for, because they don't know that it's something that can be improved.
Mm-hmm. The second thing is to ask why. So why are we doing something? Why am I picking up this story? Why is this adding value to the users? Why does this match all the way through? Be the annoying toddler in the room. Next one is, and this might annoy people, is read the business updates. Every organization I've worked with has some sort of quarterly, annual, call where you have to sit on for an hour and a half and they talk about the profit and loss, or the annual report, or you get your monthly update. This is really, really powerful in understanding where your business is, where the goals are, and if you can align what you're doing directly to it, you're onto a winner. And also implement instrumentation. So if you can have a dashboard that shows all of the good work you're doing with the green button that looks great, with the line going up, it's going to be really valuable in showing that you are doing something meaningful, that you're making an improvement to things. Stéphane and I gave this talk last week, I think it was, and one of his teams immediately went oh, we want this dashboard. How do we get this dashboard? How do we show visibility? So this is going to be a really powerful thing if you can make your work visible. So we've spoken at you for 25 minutes now, and just as a summary, product thinking means focus on your user value, thinking problem before solution, choosing outcomes over outputs, and considering that product life cycle. This is something continuous. You're going to support it forever. You want to explore and define the problems to maximize user and business value before you start working on something. Measure your product metrics to show results. And then use all of this product thinking to earn the big bucks in the future and get yourself a pay rise. Thank you very much. I've been Kat.
Stéphane. And you can provide feedback about the presentation using that QR code there.
Do we have time for questions? Does anyone have a question first, actually? No point in offering time if no one wants to ask anything. Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. We'll be around. You can find us later. Have a great lunch.
Thank you.